big criticism I got from a lot of Jordan Peterson fans was that while I was reviewing a small section of a book, trying to be entertaining and just give this kind of like really casual opinion on it, I spent a portion of my time talking about the tone and the style of writing, and a lot of people didn't like that. They thought I should have just been focusing on what was written, the content, rather than how it was written. One guy even went as far as to lecture me about how the medium is not the message, and I got a lot of, essay-length comments about this that I mostly didn't read, to be honest, because who's got time for that? And for what my lowly little opinion is worth, I could not disagree more. I think how something is written or portrayed or spoken about or just how the message gets across, I think it is just as important as what the message is. And this really got me thinking about a lot of different stuff. But today, this isn't a video about Told JP's cult. This is a video about consumer behaviour. It's a little bit about marketing. It's a video about Marshall McLuhan and his groundbreaking theory that the medium is the message. It's how, in my opinion, delivery of a message is just as important as the message itself. And we're going to be looking at loads of things like books and films. We're going to be talking a little bit about my Jordan Peterson video at the end and kind of how I feel about some things, and hopefully just kind of like putting that stuff to rest. But we're going to be talking a lot about some kind of media theory and how it affects people in real life and day to day, and I think it just should be an interesting one, hopefully. So let's start by talking about book reviews. You guys might know that I quite like reading. I speak about it a lot on my channel. I post a lot about it on Instagram. I tend to post in my little stories about what I'm currently reading, and I often post little passages I find interesting and stuff. So if you are interested in that stuff, you can go follow me on Instagram. It's at Rachel Oates with a 0 instead of an O because I'm awkward. And if you do follow me on there, or I think I've spoken about it briefly in another video, you might have seen me talk about this book by, and I hope I'm pronouncing her name right, or his name actually, I'm not sure, Shari Lapina. This book is called The Couple Next Door, and it's a fiction book. It's a thriller, and the story is actually pretty good. It's about a couple whose child goes missing while they're around at the next door neighbour's house having a kind of dinner party type thing. The story sounds brilliant. I was really, really intrigued by the story from the blurb, and the plot is pretty good for a thriller. You get pretty invested in what happens to the baby that's gone missing. You have so many questions. There are some pretty exciting little plot twists in there. I really want to find out what happened in the end. I should really, really like this book. I'm a huge fan of thrillers, but I hate it. And as soon as I finished the book, I gave it away to charity, which is something I rarely do. I normally pass on my books that I've read to friends and family who pass them on to other people, and, they give me books in return and stuff, and it's great. But not this book. And that's because I hated the writing style. It didn't matter how good the plot was, I hated how it was written. It read like a teenager's first attempt at writing fiction, and there was far too much telling rather than showing. Right, this is the second paragraph in the book, right? And it goes like this. Anne wilts in the heat of the summer night and watches her hostess with narrowed eyes. Cynthia is flirting openly with Anne's husband, Marco. Why does Anne put up with this? Why does Cynthia's husband, Graham, allow it? Anne is angry but powerless. She doesn't know how to put a stop to it without looking pathetic and ridiculous. They are all a little tanked. So she ignores it, quietly seething, and sips at the chilled wine. Anne wasn't brought up to create a scene, isn't one to draw attention to herself. There's nothing, horrifically terrible about it, the grammar's there, it tells you what's happening, but after a couple of pages of this, it gets so tiring to read. It's not absorbing, it's not creative, it's not even the kind of simplistic where it's easy to read. It's the kind of simplistic where you're just like, this is kind of mind-numbing. It's jarring, it's not fluid, and like I say, it gets kind of tiring after a couple of pages, and I found it really, really difficult to read. And I know some people might like the style, but just, as my personal opinion, I really, really hated it. So it didn't matter how good the story was. It didn't matter if she was trying to develop the characters or not, because I didn't care about the characters, because the writing style was really terrible. And it didn't matter if the plot twists were good and exciting, because I couldn't get excited about the book because I didn't like how it was written. Could I write any better than this? I don't know, probably not. But that doesn't matter here because I'm not writing a book. But as someone who is consuming the book, reading the book, as a book fan, I am more than allowed to have that opinion. And I'm more than allowed to voice them. And that's okay. We can all have our opinions about things. We don't have to have written a book ourselves to have an opinion about books. We don't have to have made YouTube videos to have opinions about YouTube videos. We don't have to have made a TV series to have an opinion about a TV series. It's how the whole consumer culture works, and it's perfectly okay. I mean, as an avid reader, I've refined my opinions on what I enjoy in books and reading over the years, right? Way back, years ago when I was doing my A-levels, I think that's the time when I started kind of really actively reading books, and kind of learning properly how to critically evaluate a text. I've been developing and refining that skill more and more over the years since. That's 8 years since I started my A-levels, and now I feel old. Anyway, the point is, it's a skill I've been working on, and as I have, my opinions on what books I enjoy and don't enjoy, it's changed, and how I read books has changed as well over the years. And I think it's a skill that most readers have and most readers develop, whether we're aware of it or not. You ask anyone who just enjoys a book, what did you enjoy about it, what didn't you enjoy about it? And even if they haven't realised it, they'll be able to come up with some really interesting points about what they thought of the writing style, or, the plot, the way it's structured, whatever. And even if they don't realise they're being super critical of the book as they're reading, most people are, and I think it's really awesome to hear people's opinions about that kind of stuff. My point is, how a book is written has a huge impact on your opinion of the book overall, right? I mean, just for me personally, it affects how much I enjoy the book. It affects how likely I am to finish the book, how engaged I am when I'm reading, how much of the content I actually take in, especially if it's a non-fiction book, and how much I think about while I'm reading and after I'm reading. And of course, it affects how likely I am to read more books by that author, and how likely I am to recommend their books to my friends and family, and so on. It has a huge, huge impact. The content of a story is important, but so is how it's told. And this isn't just true of fiction, but of all types of media. We're talking non-fiction books and textbooks. We're talking magazine articles, TV programs, films, plays, lectures even, YouTube videos, advertising. The how is just as important as the what. You can have the best product in the world, but if you're trying to sell it to people by handing them an essay of why your product works and how it'll help them, you're not going to sell it, because people aren't going to read that essay, and even if they do try and read it, they're going to be bored by it probably. But if you try and sell your amazing product by showing people the actual benefits, showing them other people enjoying your product and benefiting from that product, you've got a bestseller right there, because the how is just as important as the what. Now, a lot of it comes back to this snazzy little phrase by a guy called Marshall McLuhan, and on paper, I shouldn't like him. I should think he's a bit of a douche. You read his Wikipedia article, right, and it describes him as a professor, philosopher, and public intellectual. But all that aside, I think he's actually really awesome, because some of the work he's done, although it was controversial at the time, and to some it's still controversial, so much of it is really, really interesting, and he's one of these people where the work just stands for itself, I was introduced to him 8 years ago now by my old media studies teacher, and what I learned from reading so much of Marshall McLuhan's work has kind of stuck with me and inspired me, and it's something I still consider and think about today. And it helped me with my uni work, and back when I was working in marketing, and now here on YouTube, it helps me every video I make. So back in 1964, McLuhan wrote this book called Understanding Media, where he wrote, and I quote, "The media themselves, not the content they carry, should be the focus of study." And while I personally disagree that we shouldn't just disregard the content altogether and only focus on the medium, and I do think there should be, we should look at how they interact with each other. I think both the medium and the content is very, very important. His whole kind of concept of looking at the medium as, how the message is carried and studying that, it was revolutionary at the time, and it's made such a big impact on how we create media and how we consume media today. And I think it's amazing that he was the first one to come up with this, or at least the first one to kind of bring it into the public eye and, really make it popular. One big example that I think he spoke about was with news broadcasters and stuff like that. So we're talking kind of TV and radio and newspapers and things like that, right? Let's imagine they're reporting a crime. It would be easy to look at a story and say, okay, well, it's a factual recollection of a series of events, right? This is the story of 3 robbers robbing a bank, and they did it at this time in this place and they stole this much money. You could look at a news story and say that's all that it's about, but that's only looking at the content. You need to look at how the story is told and in what kind of context it's told to really understand the message there. It's so much more than just a recollection of events. Usually there's a message in there as well. We can gauge this whole new meaning by looking at the how. So you could look at the choice of words that they use. How do they describe the perpetrators? How do they describe the victims? What pictures do they show or use? Where in the broadcast or in the newspaper do they place the story? Like, how do they position it in relation to other stories in the news? Do they choose to interview people? And if so, who do they choose to interview? What is this message they're trying to get across? Because it's more than just a factual recollection of events. There's a message in there usually as well. You know, maybe it's a commentary on the state of society and how we view crime and justice. Maybe it's a commentary on how even seemingly victimless crimes like robbing a bank don't just affect, you know, these big nameless, faceless corporations, but they actually affect the little people, the people who are in the bank, the people who work in the bank, and so on. I don't know, like, that's just a fictional example. But the point is, by looking at the how, by looking at the medium, how the story is told, how the facts are portrayed, how something is put across to the public, we can find out so much more about the meaning and the message behind it. And I think it's amazing. And I think it's so, so important. Another example, just for me personally, would be to look at films, right? So if you follow me on Twitter, you might know that I've recently watched Ghostbusters for the first time. And I've never seen either of the Ghostbusters films, like the old one or the new one. And so I was like, okay, I've heard all these bad things about the new one, but I don't want to watch it comparing it to the old one, so I'm going to watch the new one first and then the old one afterwards, so I kind of wouldn't be influenced or whatever. And just talking about the new one here, I didn't hate it. I just thought it was a very, like, average film. Because I didn't have anything to compare it to, I guess I wasn't angry about anything, I didn't feel they were doing injustice to the source material or whatever. But just as a film, I was like, it was alright, probably wouldn't watch it again, but there you go. And now if you compare the original and the remake and look at them both in terms of, like, just the content, I guess you could say, the story behind both of them is just 4 people fight ghosts. That's it. If you take just the content, just the what, they should be the same film. They should be as good as each other, right? But of course they're not. They're different, and people are going to have different responses to them because of the how, because of how the story is told, because of how the film is made, because of how it's marketed to people, because the medium is the message. The medium is just as important as the content. The newer Ghostbusters struggles with these one-dimensional characters who I didn't feel emotionally invested in, and there's a disjointed flow in the narrative between, like, the story itself and the jokes they tell. They just kind of feel a little out of place and awkward and weird, and I didn't really laugh that much. And the specific camera shots in the film and, you know, like, how it's made, essentially, and it just lacked creativity, and it didn't feel like there was any kind of, like, passion or, yeah, there was no evidence of any passion when they were making the film. It was just a very kind of bland, okay film it just felt like a bit of a money grab, to be honest, rather than anything anyone actually cared about, which was a real shame. And you can kind of tell that in how they made the film, right? And that's why, even though the old film and the new film are both just 4 people fight ghosts, how the story is told is so completely different that we get very different emotional responses to the film, right? It's the difference between, yeah, a kind of average film and a great film. I feel like what I'm saying is kind of obvious here, but at the same time, this is clearly something that some people, like a lot of my old commenters, didn't really get. You know, they seem to think that just the message is important, just the content is important. I was told things like, oh, well, university lectures are boring and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, yeah, and that's why I didn't listen to some of them. When I had a really interesting, engaging lecture, I learned so much more. The how is just as important as the what. And some people might be happy listening to boring and be able to take in boring, but just personally, I can't, and I can't help that. I think this whole idea of, like, the medium is the message is a super, super important, like, theory for everyone to consider. Like, both consumers of content and content creators. It can change how we view the world and how we really evaluate the messages that we're seeing and getting and also putting out ourselves. I think it's really, really important. It's something that I try and bring into my YouTube channel with every video I create, because content-wise, there could be, and there probably are, hundreds, if not thousands of people talking about similar topics to me or the same topics. What makes my channel unique is the way I present the topics to you, or at least I hope it's unique. Because I'm putting my emotions here on show and I'm giving you my opinions, and that's something that no one else can give. You know, the way I try and include like stupid jokes and silly stuff and just talk to you like a regular person, instead of just listing off dry facts and figures and just telling you this is what this person said and this is what this person said. And then on this date, this thing happened. There are so many people out there talking about different topics, but how they talk about them is what makes you want to watch, right? I mean, and the topic itself. This is what I'm saying. It's the relationship between the how and the what that makes creative, engaging, enjoyable content. You can have a really engaging person, but if they're talking about something bland and boring, it's probably going to be bland and boring. And you can have a super interesting topic, but if they're talking about it in a really bland, boring way, or you just don't care about what they have to say, you're not going to listen. And obviously, like I say, that's not to say everyone's going to like the way that I present things and talk about things, and not everyone's going to like that I put my opinion out here, and that I make stupid jokes, and that I do stupid stuff. And not everyone's going to like the fact that I'm so kind of like casual and everyday about the way I use words. But that's okay, because there are other people out there talking about the same topics in a different way. And if you search for it, you'll be able to find someone who's doing it in a way that you enjoy and you like and that's engaging to you, right? Now I've got the kind of interesting factual stuff out of the way, I just kind of want to talk about how this has kind of like affected me on a very personal level and what I've been thinking about this stuff over the last like week or so. So if you don't want to watch this bit, you don't have to, that's fine. You can just end this here and I'll see you next time. So as a lot of you know, like I've received a lot of crap in the last week from Jordan Peterson fans. Seriously, I have been called the C word more in this last week than the last 25.5 years of my life put together. To say they all think they're like really smart and clever and accuse me of having a low IQ, they don't half swear a lot and just name call. Anyway, and while it did upset me for a long time, and you know, it still does, because who wants to wake up to 100 messages on their phone calling you a pathetic little teenage C word with an IQ of 20 who could never possibly understand the god-level intellect of me writing this comment and also Jordan Peterson. Now I am kind of starting to work through it because I'm kind of trying to put the emotions aside and kind of look at their comments on a more like logical place, which is really hard to do, but I'm trying. And I realise that so many of the criticisms come from people placing these weird expectations on me and my video, and then when I don't live up to them, they get mad at me for it. And I'm like, I never said I was going to do that. Is that my fault or is that theirs? I don't know. But at the end of the day, I still stand by everything I said in my video, and if they're angry about it, it's kind of their problem and not mine. When I went into that video, I was trying to be quite open and honest with you guys, and I hope I was, in saying that, you know, I haven't read the whole book yet. I've read a couple of chapters, and I'm only talking about the first 2 here, right? I hope I kind of made it clear that I was treating it as like any other book review, so I'd be talking about, you know, the tone and the writing style, and just how the narrator came across and so on. The medium as well as the message. And I'm not going to apologise for talking about things like that, because they're important to me when I read a book. And I care about how a book is written as well as what's in it, right? And I'm not going to apologise for that. It doesn't make me stupid because I want an entertaining read as well as an informative one. You know, I'm not going to apologise for disliking Peterson's writing style any more than I'm going to apologise for disliking Lapina's writing style or disliking the writing style of a neurology textbook I had to read in uni, you know? I mean, I even said in places that I had no problems with some of his science, right? Particularly the stuff about, like, social hierarchies and stuff. I called it good stuff because it was good stuff. Again, basic but accurate, so no issues there. He talks about pecking orders and animal hierarchies, and again, it's pretty basic, but, you know, decent start, that's okay. There are some good bits where he actually talks about serotonin and its effects on people, and it was, like, scientifically sound, and I have no issues with that. But then there was this stuff about, like, lobsters' brains dissolving that I had a huge problem with, because I noted how, yeah, nervous systems, kind of like elastic and stuff, that's what it's called, and how connections between neurons can break and others can form, and blah, blah, blah. And, like, I spoke about that stuff, right? And I said that, you know, in the context that it was written, saying a lobster's brain basically dissolves just seems a bit dishonest because it was factually inaccurate. And others came back to me with this whole like, oh, but it's just figurative, you idiotic poophead. To which I say, you know, perhaps it was meant figuratively, but that wasn't made clear in his writing. And maybe that's a sign of poor writing, or maybe it was intended to be a little bit more dramatic than the reality, which is just brains change. Him placing that lobster's brains dissolve where he did would be the equivalent of me in a video saying, so blood is basically made of like red blood cells and plasma and magic fairy dust and white blood cells, and then getting mad when people call me out for saying blood contains magic fairy dust because I was like, oh my god, guys, it's figurative, can't you tell? Do you know what I mean? And I'm not trying to say that writing about science always has to be boring and dry, or that it always has to be super entertaining. But as an example, I'd say look at anything written by Oliver Sacks, right? I've been reading a few of his books recently, and I think he gets that relationship between the how and the what, between the medium and the message. I think he gets it right a great deal of the time. Not always, but often. He's very good at writing, like, he was a neurologist. He died, sadly. He's a very, very smart man with some very interesting ideas about a lot of things, and he knew how to write beautifully, and he also knew how to tell a thoroughly engaging story. So it makes reading his stuff very easy, very engrossing, and you learn without realizing you're learning, and then you go away and you think about the stories he kind of told about patients or experiences that he's had and things that he's done, and you think about them, and then you realize that you're thinking about the ideas at the same time, and so you know, it forces you to really think in depth about what he's talking about. Basically, what I'm saying is he was a fantastic author, and I thoroughly enjoy his books, and I think, you know, he, most of the time, not always, but a lot of the time, he gets a really, really good balance between medium and message. You know, and while we're on the subject of like style and presentation and things like that, I know that as a YouTuber, a huge chunk of how I'm portrayed in my videos comes down to how I look, and there are certain things I can't control. So for all the people trying to insult me by calling me a stupid teenager and still a child, and you haven't experienced this and you haven't experienced this, I could clap back at them all and say, well, like, I'm not a child, I've done all of that, blah, 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 you know, and when people are like, get a real job, and I'm like, I worked for 10 years before I did this. Yeah, like, there's a lot I can say, but ultimately, like, I can't change how my face looks, and other than hanging my birth certificate and degree on my wall, and opening every video by giving you an in-depth description of how many wrinkles have appeared since the last video, usually more than I'd like. Other than doing that, there's not really a lot I can do about it. That said, I guess there are things I could do about, like, my clothes and my makeup and stuff. Yeah, I'm not very good at kind of judging what other people are gonna think about what I wear and how I look, so normally I just go for whatever's comfy or fun on the day, right? And honestly, I don't think it really makes that much difference in terms of like just my content on a personal level, if that makes sense. My job technically is to be an entertainer. That's what I'm trying to do with these videos. I'm trying to entertain you guys and give you something fun to watch. And if you learn stuff on the way or think about stuff on the way or want to argue with me on the way, that's fine, but they're all kind of bonus things to the entertainment side. So I feel like in terms of what I want to portray physically and like facially and stuff, awkward hand movements, I think basically like the best thing I can do is just portray as authentic a version of myself as I can, and that means wearing the same kinds of makeup I wear to go to like a friend's party, or wearing the same clothes I wear around the house because they're comfy and I'm really lazy. And that's about it, because I just want to portray this natural, normal, authentic version of me, and that's all I'm gonna do, really. But then I had this one comment, and it was a bit of an essay, so obviously my low IQ brain couldn't process all the big words in it, so I'll summarise and skip over the boring bits. Basically, this man was mad. I think it was a man anyway. Most of these angry ones were from men. He seemed mad because he was kind of like projecting these expectations onto me again, and then getting mad when I didn't meet them, right? It's like a trend here. And so he starts off his comment with like, dear Miss Eyeshadow, blah 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 blah, because you didn't like Peterson's writing style and only choose to do a casual review instead of like a totally legit academic intellectual one, and you were trying to be entertaining, it means you're not able to comprehend his intellectual superiority, and blah 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 blah. I don't think he liked my mocking voices either, so I'm going to continue with them. And then he ends with this line that says like, you would know that you would look more professional and cuter without a paint job. And like I say, I got a couple more comments like these from older men who totally know what they're talking about. They are who I go to for fashion advice. And it kind of confused me because I was like, more professional? Can you explain to me what exactly you mean by more professional? And why exactly you think I want to look more professional or need to look more professional? I don't want to go back to the formal, boring clothes I had to wear when I had office jobs. I don't want to wear suits and, I don't want to sit and talk about my, opinions and make silly jokes and talk about puppies and science and books while I'm wearing a suit. Because one, that would be super uncomfortable, and two, I think it would kind of just look like I felt like I was better than you guys, and I'm sat here in my fancy suit looking down on you. And I don't want to do that because, I'm just a normal person. I'm no different from you guys, I'm no better than you guys, and I don't want to pretend that I am by wearing some suit. I'm not like an academic who's lecturing at some university and trying to teach people me. I'm just a young woman sharing her opinions on the internet. That's it. I don't know, maybe I got the wrong end of the stick. Maybe he didn't mean more professional in terms of wearing suits and no makeup and Maybe he meant I just need to dress more like, the leaders in this industry, right? So let me see how the leading content creators on this site dress, and I'll try and do that, and it'll totally look more professional, right? Maybe not. Thank you so much for watching today. An extra special thank you goes to Gambit and his show for Deshawn, Mark Darner, Christian Berg, Rachel B. Royer, Jaden Shepherd, Jaylee Moore, Religion is BS, Sir Michael Moore, Tater Thoughts, Greg Ladd, and Pixelated Skeptic. And to everyone who has supported me on Patreon this month, a huge thank you and hugs and love goes out to you guys. You guys are amazing. Also worth mentioning, if you like this video, you should subscribe because that would be really cool. I have merch available if you want to go check it out. I absolutely love it. And I also host a science podcast, which you can check out called The Here and How. That's me done. I'm going to stop talking. Thanks a lot, guys.